So let me introduce my father, and let me introduce my father to my students, which is really nice. So Abba, my father's in Yerushalayim. He's the real Rabbi Krauss, and he's in Yerushalayim. They made Aliyah about 15 years ago, exactly when I moved, when my family moved back to America. So nothing personal, but the timing was a little bit off. I was living outside, and I came back to America. My parents moved to Israel, and then they were back here for a couple of years in between. So it's nice to see you, Abba. My father and my mother are both also pretty much quarantined like the rest of us. The rules in Israel were pretty tough, although I understand that they're being relaxed. Is that true?
Pardon?
Are they being relaxed, the rules, a little bit now in Israel?
They relaxed it a little bit, but not meaningfully yet. Not certainly for older people that didn't relax it yet.
So for over 40, they're not relaxed yet. Okay, got it. Yeah. My father, we had a conversation a couple of years ago. We were talking about survivors, and I never exactly thought of my parents as survivors, because thank God they were never in concentration camps. And my father would tell you a little bit about how he was in a part of Romania that people don't really know about because there were no deportations. So he lived what he always says is a relatively normal life during the war. They went to school and they had what my father always described as regular anti-Semitism. They beat him up on the way home from school, and he's afraid of dogs to this day because they used to kind of throw the dogs at him just to taunt him. But unfortunately and understandably, compared to the experiences of many, that was, as they say, a walk in the park. And we're all obviously grateful for that. And my father came to America. When did you come to America? 47 or 48?
48. So we came to America in 1948.
1948.
From Romania.
From Romania through Italy, I think, to America. And as you heard, my grandfather was a rabbi in Washington Heights at the shul that is just like a block away from the George Washington Bridge. It's called Sharei HaTikva. And my father was a rabbi for a couple of years in upstate New York, in Utica, New York, and then in St. Louis, Missouri, for 11 years, and then for 25 years in Hillcrest in Queens. And I actually ended up in SIR. What?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
What?
And I ended up in SIR because my parents wanted to make a little bit of a change for me because school wasn't really working for me. So they sent me to a school in Riverdale, even though I lived in Queens. And that's kind of how I ended up in SIR the first time, and probably how I ended up in SIR the second time because of my experience the first time. So that's the background. Our topic is a hard one, but it's an important one. And our topic is faith after the Holocaust, or faith around the Holocaust, or religious or theological questions around the Holocaust. They're really, really big questions, but I actually think that you guys are capable of understanding those questions and thinking about those questions. And I know that a lot of what I feel about this is what I get from my father and from my parents. And I wanted the opportunity to try to bring you into the conversation with him because I know how much I got from that. And I'm going to try to do this interview style, Abba, if that's okay with you.
Excuse me?
I'll do the kind of the early interview questions, but I invite everybody, students, teachers, whoever's here, to also share questions, which I will.
Okay.
Father's not following the chat, but I'll follow the chat for you, and I will share those questions. So, okay, I guess let's talk about today before we talk about the Shoah. We're all living through a virus that is frankly scary and is changing our lives. You're talking to 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds here who have been home for 7 weeks straight. Some of them haven't left their houses, and if they have, it's been for a very short time. We're talking about this thing that we can't see, and sometimes we ask, like, why would God do something like this? You have an answer to that question?
Okay, whether I have an answer to that question or not, I don't know, but I'll try to talk about it. There's one statement I want to make before I speak to your question, because something you mentioned before. You said you were correct in saying that I'm not a survivor in the general sense. We were not in concentration camps, and I lived a normal life. But if you know the history of World War II, and if you know the history of the Shoah, you know very well that Jews, wherever they are survivors. Even if they were in America, Jews are survivors. Because what he wanted, what Hitler wanted, what the Nazis wanted, was the Hashmit Laharo Gulabei, and they wanted it for every Jew in the world. So everyone was in danger. It so happened that some were in everyday danger every minute. Those who unfortunately ended up in the camps and the 6 million who were killed. And we were a little further from that, but we are all survivors. Now let's go back to your question. Obviously, we have to sort of break up the question. The fact is that theodicy, the idea of justifying God's way, that is something that's an old question. Why you don't have to ask it only about the Shoah. You can ask, why does a 1-year-old child die from cancer? That's also a problem, and it's a major problem. It's something that I, for example, when I think about God, these are the things that don't let me sleep. The Shoah is a question 6 million times over, but essentially the idea why God does what he does, and I'm not going to answer to you, not in 5 minutes, not in half an hour, and I don't have an answer to that. But I would like to use a frame of reference that Rav Soloveitchik says. Rav Soloveitchik says something very important in Kol Dodi Dofei. He says like this: we can't ask, he calls it illegitimate to ask why God does X, Y, and Z. When we confront evil, we can't ask, why did the evil happen? We don't really know. We don't really know. What we have a right to ask is, now that evil did happen, and now that I'm confronting evil, what's my response to evil? Let's take the Shoah. Why the Shoah happened is sociologically and politically and so on, and philosophically, it's a problem that takes your whole lifetime. But now that it happened, how do we respond to it? So according to Rav Soloveitchik, the Jewish response to it and God's response to it, because without God nothing goes, the Jewish response to it is we created a Medina. We knew that one of the results of statelessness, of powerlessness, of not having Jewish powers, one of the results were pogroms and discriminations and murder of Jews. And one of the responses was to create a Medina. And that hopefully doesn't mean it solved the problem of anti-Semitism. We know that anti-Semitism exists even in 2020. On the other hand, it's a response to that.
But Abba, I don't understand. I'm sorry. I'm gonna push a little harder.
Okay.
Right? How could you just skip the question of why? Okay, that's very nice to go to what, and I'm very happy that all those things that we're learning and we're doing good things and whatever. But did God do it? Did he decide that this should happen?
If God is with us, I will answer only what somebody in the camps was. Somebody in the camps, a great Rabbi who was saved after the Shoah and built a city in Israel, was asked this question: was God with you? He says, I don't know whether he was with me, but he wasn't with the Nazis. He wasn't outside of the world, so he must have been with me. How exactly it worked, why did so many people kill, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. And that the answer is, and the question bothers me. I'm not bothered by it.
How about the people that say,
it doesn't necessarily mean I have to, look here. There were many people. There were some survivors from the concentration camps, yes? Yeah. The Sherry Taplato, there were some. Some of them came out after the camp as denying God, and nobody can blame them. I can't blame them. On the other hand, some of them, the same people who were in the same Auschwitz, came out of there affirming God and rebuilding their life. Look at some of the Hasidic communities. The Hasidic communities that still go by the European name, Klosenberg or Bobov or Belz. I mean, Belz had 10 people in 1945, and now they have the biggest synagogue in Yerushalayim. That's a response. Mm-hmm. They didn't lose their faith. Some did lose their faith, and I can't blame them. You know, somebody said, listen, if somebody's this, I can understand somebody who was a great believer in 1935 and a great atheist in 1945. I can understand. I can understand somebody who's an atheist in 1935 and a believer in 1945. I can't understand somebody who was the same person in 1935 and the same person in 1945. Obviously, we respond in different ways, and we're not remaining the same. But the fact is that there are plenty of people, plenty in the sense, relatively speaking, who were in the Shoah and came out great believers. And just as I don't blame, so to say, blame in quotation marks, those who are not believers, because I understand them very well, I can also understand that hell that was called Auschwitz also created believers. How psychologically, I'll have to ask a psychologist.
Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say that God allowed Hitler to his own free will, and Hitler made these decisions? And that
whatever, these are the old answers, that in order for free will to exist, God has to, what the Zohar calls, be metzamtzem himself. He has to limit himself. Otherwise, man would be a robot.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can't tell you. It sounds very good, that answer, but I can't believe it, because after all, there are 6 million people who are killed and God is silent. You know,
very hard
it's not. It's a philosophical answer. It's good for a book report, but an existential answer, it isn't.
Mm-hmm. I read that there are some people who say that they are reasons. You know, we read in the Torah that if you do the mitzvot, then you get rewarded. And
just
if you
a little louder.
I read that there are some people who say, well, when things happen, that's exactly what the Torah says. The Torah says that if you do the mitzvot, you get rewarded, and if you don't do the mitzvot, you get punished. Is that the way we should look at these things?
No, that fetish not. That's wrong.
Why?
You see, because first of all, I don't think we know God's mind. I don't know God's computer. You know, the Rambam really says that, he defines the tzaddik that one way and the Rashi another way. He says, but how God defines them, we don't know. We don't know God's computer. We can understand. I'll give you an example, a little bit from, in a manner of speaking, it'll take a minute, from this week's Sedra as a manner of speaking. I'll try to make it very simple. The Chumash said last Shabbos that the children of Aharon died b'korvosam lifnei Hashem vayamusu, which is a very strange thing. They came near to God and then they died. We know that nearness to God is life-giving. Ki kirvas Elokim litov. Closeness to God means that's good for me. What does it mean that they died because they were too close to God? I think the answer in a nutshell is based on the Ramban. The Ramban says on the Pasuk in Vayisro that they saw Vayechzu et Elohim, they saw God, Vayochlu Vayishtu. People got punished for that. That they saw God and they ate. So people got punished for that. Why? Says the Ramban, because what does it mean you see God? It means you understand God. And when a human being fully understands God, you see, God is a God. God can be strict, and he can have compassion at the same time, and one doesn't touch the other. But if a human being is like God, and I see somebody sinning, and I see him punished, and I say, the reason he's punished is because he's sinning, that means that I know God's mind. And I'm so close to God, I know his mind. And that's cruelty. That's cruelty on the part of a human being. So because they saw Jewish history, they saw Shoah, and they understood it. If you understand that, that's cruelty. I hope I made myself clear. You can ask me questions.
I think you did. I will. And again, everyone's invited if you want to ask any kinds of questions in the chat, which I'll be happy to relay to my father. So let's move again to what our kids are experiencing. Everybody's experiencing now. There's a different kind of enemy, right? It's not a person, really. It's a virus, and we don't know how it got started, and it kind of just happened, so to speak. But we believe in God. So what where's God in this? Did he make this happen? Does he want this to happen? How does he want us to respond to it?
Again, as a philosopher, I'll tell you that certain things, for example, again, I'll use an example from what I mentioned before from the Zohar. The Zohar discusses the problem, how come there's evil in this world? How come there's evil in this world? So the Zohar uses a term that I used before, that God, in creating the world, did something to be metzamtzem himself, to limit himself. Because if God wouldn't limit himself, there would be no sense of creativity in the world. In what makes civilization possible, and what makes certain things possible. What makes certain things possible is because there's a lack. So God had to salve reverentia. God had to limit himself, create a world which is not perfect, and that imperfection of the world means there's sickness and there's death and there's wrongness and there's bad relationships and there's all kind of evil. But this is for man to overcome that, which is, again, as a philosophical answer, I think that's correct. Whether now that I know a good friend of mine died from the coronavirus, and another person got very sick from the coronavirus, whether I understand it existentially, I don't exactly understand it existentially. I do know that it's a challenge for the human being, not only to pray for a feinu, but to act for a feinu. In other words, a Jew or a human being who studies medicine, then he's helping God in fighting the coronavirus.
And does it make sense? And obviously we don't believe that a doctor or anybody should say, well, if this is what God wanted, then we should just let it be. We're supposed to fight it, right? So we're supposed to fight it. Even though God did it, we're supposed to fight it. And God wants us to.
That's right. If you don't believe in human beings, there was a time when the church was against medicine because it meant fighting God. Judaism never believed in that. I always say, you may have heard me say it, because, I wanted some of my kids to be doctors. I said that Judaism has a love affair with medicine.
Okay, but I think all three of your kids are on this call right now. I think I invited them a few minutes ago. I think they're here somewhere, so you can say hello too. Sorry, I just had a question. Oh, I know one of the things that you spoke about a lot. I know, like I said, you're living in Israel now because you almost ended up in Israel. You told me, and maybe you'll tell everybody about that. How
in that 1948, yeah,
was trying to decide where to go. You want to talk about that for a second? How did you almost end up there, and why didn't you end up there?
Okay, it's not me. I was a kid of 10, 11.
No.
But okay, the point is as follows. We lived in Romania. And after 1945, we were finished with the fascists, the communists came in. So essentially, we had to run away. Because, my father was a rabbi in the big city, and the communists didn't like clergy, and so on and so forth and so forth. We had to run away. My father, Dafka, wanted to go to Israel, and that's why he was a big Zionist all his life. He Dafka wanted to go to Israel. But those days, before there was a state, you needed what's called a certificate. And in mandatory Palestine, before 1948, you needed a certificate. You didn't just get a visa. There was a quota. How many Jews from Romania will the British allow? So we couldn't. And my mother had a brother in America. And to America, it was relatively easy to go. So we made the decision. We had to run Romania. My father's existence in Romania would have been untenable if he remains there after 1948. So that's the way it was. The truth is that to America, we did as follows. We went from Romania to Italy. On the way to Italy, we stopped at the Haifa port, and the Haganah came up and asked who wants to come with us. And my father first said yes, but okay, nothing happened because it was wartime.
So you kept on going.
A war in Israel at that time.
Yeah.
War in Palestine.
You also, one of the things that you also brought us up on is that a deep, deep appreciation for America, which I think was informed by your experiences in Europe. Can you talk about that?
Okay, I'll talk about that. Of course, I'll talk about that.
Great.
You know, I'm in yeshiva and I'm in Jewish schools. So many times I was asked whether it's right to celebrate Thanksgiving. And, you know, some people say that celebrating Thanksgiving is chukas hagoy, it's celebrating a non-Jewish holiday, etc., etc. So I always relate the following story, but you need a little patience for that. It's about 1947, and after the war, it's the first election in Romania. First election in Romania, and who are the two parties? The parties are the Communist Party. They call themselves Democrats, and then there was a so-called Farmers Party that would have been the non-socialist, the non-communist party. As we were children playing in the yard, and what seemed to me a plane that was 10 times as big as it really was, hurting down leaflets, and the leaflet said, it's election day, vote for the Democrats. There were some leaflets that also said, work for the Farmers Party, but mostly said, vote for the Democrats. That meant the communists. In the meantime, I see my parents leave the house. And I ask my parents, where are you going? And they say, it's election day, we're going to vote. Okay, great. When they came back, I asked my mother, who did you vote for? So my mother became as white as a beautiful summer dress was. And she said, children don't ask such things. So I was a good child and I didn't go further with that. Okay, that was the summer of 1947. Now the memory goes 1 year further. The summer of 1948, we happened to be after Italy and so on, we happened to be in America. And the first place we went to was in Minneapolis, because my father needed a visa, of course, but he also needed a place to work. So there was a shul in Minneapolis that took my father as a rabbi, where he went to fulfill the promise that he will not fall on the state in the Twin Cities. Good. But initially, one particular Shabbos, we go to our uncle. My uncle was a rabbi too. And people come over to him. And all of a sudden, they spoke half Yiddish, half English. I hear somebody ask the other, "For wem wird ihr voten?" Who will you vote for? So somebody says, the Democratic Party. And I said, oh, that's communist. But somebody said, the Farmers Party. I said, what do you mean the Farmers Party? What do you mean the Farmers Party? So when they left, I asked Tante Gittel, I asked her, you tell each other who you vote for? You know what happened in Romania? In Romania, when you voted for the Farmers Party, there was a period of 2 weeks or 2 months where the following thing happened. We were kids. We saw on the street the following thing. A person is being led by a policeman with a rifle and a bayonet, and the policeman eggs him on, and he has a poster on himself. I deserve to be shot because I voted for the anti-democratic Farmers Party. And in the Romanian equivalent of the New York Times, there was every day a story that in the city of Bucharest, 3 people were shot for being anti-government. In the people of Sibiu, 6 people were shot. In the city of Klausenburg, 4 people were shot. I said, that's what's happening in Romania. And here you tell each other, you vote for the Farmers Party? So my aunt gave me a lesson in American civics. And she said, no, that's true. Maybe in Romania it's true, but we are a democracy. We have civil discourse and we have civil arguments and nobody is being shot. And she kept me up next November elections to watch on television to see that the winner congratulates, the loser congratulates the winner, and they shake hands, etc., etc. So she taught me the first lesson in democracy, and that's why I always say, God bless America, and I celebrate Thanksgiving.
Okay. Somebody asked, going back to our original topic, middle school children who are thinking about their faith and exactly what they believe, and sometimes they have a hard time finding tefillah or davening meaningful. What can they do about that, or how can they think about that, or how can they connect?
I can't tell you a correct answer. Tefillah meaningful is a difficult issue, not only with children, it's an issue for adults too. But it comes with work. You know, the best story about this kind of thing is it's better than not davening. I'll give you a story. Professor Heschel says this story in one of his books on tefillah. He says as follows, in the choice between yes davening and not davening. Yes, he says, in a particular city, all the watches, all the clocks in the city broke. And there were months and months and months and years, nobody came to fix the clocks. There was no clockmaker. So many people who threw away their clocks. If there's no clockmaker, we don't need it. Finally, after 10 years, a clockmaker came. He could only fix those clocks that were saved. I believe that if you daven every day Shabbos, you come to the minyan, I know now it's difficult, you're closed, but if you come and you daven and so on, you will ultimately find some meaning in tefillah. I can't tell you that I have a patent. I can't tell you that I have a formula. I think that you have to think about it. The very fact that you think about it is itself something. You have to know Perush Hamilos, besides you have Perush Hamilos. You have to know, as Reb Chaim Soloveitchik says in his Sefer, halachically, that tefillah is Amidah Lifnei Hashem. When you say tefillah, when you say the Shemester, you have to think that you're before God. And if you think every day, 3 times a day, that you're before God, there will be many times that will be very, very meaningful.
Okay. One of our students, Emma, asked, shouldn't a rabbi try to understand Hashem? How could a rabbi say that we don't always understand Hashem? Isn't that your job?
No. A rabbi has to study, and the rabbi has to know how to learn, and the rabbi has to be involved in philosophical issues. But a rabbi is no more opening to God than any person. That's the greatness of Judaism. You know, there's certain things we don't say in davening. You know, in our home, Friday night, we don't say Baruch Hu L'Shalom. Why don't we say Baruch Hu L'Shalom? Why do I skip Baruch Hu L'Shalom? Because you don't play to an intermediary. In Judaism, the great idea of Judaism is that it's not an angel that blesses you, it's God. You ask directly God. In this case, there's no difference between a rabbi and the young kid who understands these things. There's no difference. Man and woman, everybody can come directly to God.
So we have a bunch of kids, 213 people on this video right now, Abba, probably more because some people are using a couple of people on a device. And like I said, they've been home for 7 weeks. And you know, you're a couple of years older than everyone here, and you've gone through a little bit more. So what's your message? How do we find hope and know that life is going to be better? And how do we stay strong? You have any secrets? I know that you're having a hard time too, which is okay. But
no, I again, patentim I don't have, and I don't have formulas. But for example, I can tell you what I do. You know, I'm stuck in the house too. Now, as a man, you know, I teach in the yeshiva, but the kids come from Australia, from New Zealand. They were all sent back. So now, next week, we'll start giving shiurim on Zoom, the way we're doing it now. And so what do? But before I'm giving the shiurim, and that will be very shorter shiurim. It wouldn't be as long as I'm together with the kids. I learn a little better. I try to daven a little better. I try to learn a little more. And you keep your contact with the Rabbi Shalom. The way to keep a contact with the Rabbi Shalom, I'm an old Litvak, I grew up in yeshiva. It's through learning. Through learning and learning and learning and davening and davening and davening and doing chesed. You could help even if you're in the lockdown. You can call up your neighbor. You can find, does your neighbor have everything that he needs? Is there something that you can help? Certain things that you can help. And you do that. And you don't live only in yourself. And then how you do that, you develop that sense. And that's important.
We have only about 5 minutes left. Is there anybody that would like to share something? Actually, you can just unmute yourselves and speak, and I'll try to help you out if you need help. But if anybody wants to, again, children or adults, anything you want to say or ask, you're welcome to do that now. I'll leave it open for a minute.
Well, Anna Elkanovich had a question. Anna El, I'm going to spotlight you so you can ask your question.
What?
Just unmute yourself. Or I'll do it for you. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, I said I couldn't. So, like, if we're thinking of these things, how is it like that God maybe has some say in it? Does he, like, how does it benefit him or us?
To do a bad thing, to do a horrible, like something bad happening in the world, why would God do it? Does it have benefit for God? Is that your question?
Okay, that's a very good question. That's a wonderful question. I don't think it's God's benefit. But for us, the fact that there's such a thing as scientists and doctors who are helping to find a vaccine, let's say, for the coronavirus, that means that the world will be a better world. And that man has to do. Human beings have to do that. Human beings have to help the Rebbeinu Shalom. Human beings have to help God in making it a better world. That's why God created man. By working, by doing chesed, by being involved in medicine, by being involved in scientific research, by trying to do something that in itself is helping God.
We don't know that he benefits from the sickness, but he benefits from partnering with us to make the world better, or allowing us to be partners.
Rabbi Simcha Krauss, through your family's history and through all the things that you lived in your life, have you ever had doubt?
Yeah, I had a lot of doubt. I'm not telling you that sometimes things come easy. There are periods when, specifically when I was a teenager, that I didn't always want to learn. I didn't always want to do mitzvot. I sometimes tried to rebel. I did not always put on film, but I did put it on. I had doubts, but somehow there was, I'm not telling you that it's my credit. It's probably the credit of my family. When a particular day that I didn't want to put on film, but it came 15 minutes before Shkia, I ran to get my film and put film on. What pushed me then? I made a decision that it's better to be with, that you have to sometimes, I wasn't convinced at that time that film is the best thing in the world. But I felt that in Judaism, besides the doubts, you also have to act. Judaism is a religion of action, and that's also action.
We're going to gather next week, exactly a week from now, for Yom HaZikaron and then Yom HaAtzmaut. You kind of referred to this, but do you feel there's a connection between these days?
Pardon?
You feel there's a connection between this week and next week?
There is a connection, but there's one thing that I don't want to say. I don't want to say that because of the Shoah. The Shoah was something that's ultimately bad and ultimate evil. And I don't want to say because of the Shoah we got the Medina. There is a connection in a different way. There's a connection in a different way. If the Shoah was evil in this world, then when the Medina happened, with human help, etc., it showed the greatness of what can happen to a people that just 3 years ago suffered so much, and all of a sudden we have an independent state. And, I live in Israel. I want you all to come to Israel, but if you see the kind of state it is, with all its problems, it's amazing what's happening here. So in that sense, there's a connection. And you should celebrate and say Hallel.
We're definitely going to celebrate. We're definitely going to say Hallel. You can join us, although it will be Mincha time for you, so you'll have to, have Hallel with Mincha, but you're definitely welcome to join us from Israel. We're going to be inviting all of our SIR families in Israel to join next week. First for Yom HaZikaron, which is important before Yom HaAtzmaut, to pay tribute to the soldiers, and then, of course, to celebrate the state of Israel. Final word, if anybody wants to say something. I don't want to close anybody down.
Rabbi Krauss, I wanted to ask you, first of all, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It was so meaningful. And also, as a grandfather, is there any message that you have to the middle school students on how they can reach out to their grandparents, show that they love them, learn about their life story? Do you have any quick advice on that note?
Well, I can't, again, to put it shortly, let me tell it to you in a Dvar Torah that I heard from Rav Soloveitchik. There seems to be a contradiction in the Rambam. Parents have to teach their children Torah. Parents have to teach their children Torah. Is there an issue of teaching grandchildren? And what's bigger, teaching your child or teaching your grandchild? So it happens to be that in the Gemara there are two positions. That's not a contradiction. But the Rambam in one place, page 1 of Hilchot Talmud Torah, hold that it's better to learn with your child. And in page 3 of Hilchot Talmud Torah, Perek Beis, he says it's better to teach with your grandchild. So it's a contradiction, isn't it? So he says as follows, and that's the message I want to give. He says as follows. He says the truth is that as Torah has two parts of it. Part of Torah is the intellect. Intellectually, probably it's much better for the father to teach the child, because the father knows the child better, he understands the child better. To give over the intellect of Baba Metzia, the father knows better. But there's something that the grandfather has that the child doesn't have. What does the grandfather has? Since he's older, he's closer to Sinai, correct? He's closer to Sinai than the father. The grandfather is closer to Mount Sinai. And in Mount Sinai, there wasn't only we received the Torah, but there was fire and there was excitement. There was life, there was excitement. The experience of Torah, the grandfather knows better. So what I'm trying to say is that the grandchildren should, in SAR, they have fantastic intellectual way of learning Torah, but they should know that their grandparents can give them the excitement, the bren, the fire of Torah, and that should remain with them. And together, obviously, you have what SAR wants to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Abba, for your time. Thank you all for tuning in. Mrs. Steinberg, what's next for the middle school?
Pardon?
They have a break now, and then at 1:30, they'll hear you read the names on the same Zoom link here, and then at 1:45 they have a paired advisory session, which will follow the diary of a teenager through the Holocaust.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
Should be successful and celebrate things.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Krauss, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you so much.
Be well, Rabbi Krauss.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
It's so
Okay, hold on one second.
Shalom.
love all the thank yous. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Abba, stick around one more second.
Okay. Okay.
I
moving-
remember when you spoke to us in 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 2 years ago. I remember when you told us your story 2 years ago in 4th grade when I was in 4th grade.
Did you hear that up?
Hello.
She said she remembers when you spoke to them in 4th grade.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Krauss. You
Shalom,
look well.
how are you?
Please give my best to Esther, and
Thank
you
you.
should continue to be well, and just
We all should be well
continue
and,
to be Marbit
accomplish
Torah
it.
like you do, and inspire us
Thank
all.
Thank
Okay, take care. Bye.
Okay, we're waiting another minute, and then I'll have a formal meeting.
Thank you, rabbis. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.